Hello and welcome to Video Game Hangover. I'm Randy Dickinson and I'm in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania.
Hello, I'm DJ Ross. I am in Mountain View, California.
Each week on Video Game Hangover, we talk about the games that have been keeping us up at night. On this week's show, we're checking out Viewfinder, and we're back into that Final Fantasy thing. Final Fantasy XVI thing.
Back on it. Still on it? Still on it.
Back on your bullshit, DJ.
Never left. Yeah. Back on even more bullshit.
In the best way possible. People like that game. People are big fans of Final Fantasy XVI.
Oh, yeah, it's great. I mean, I wouldn't be back on it if I wasn't enjoying it. It's not that kind of game.
No, you don't have some, innate obligation to force yourself through every Final Fantasy game.
I mean, I sort of do, but this is not one of those cases.
This is not.
Where I'm like, this is not Final Fantasy 13, where I was just like, I gotta get through this. I gotta just force myself to see the credits on this.
Yeah.
No, I actually enjoy this quite a bit.
Excellent. Yeah, we've got quite a few folks in our Discord community enjoying it as well. Eshian, who we've talked about on the show in the past, wrapped it up over the weekend. He said it's a 10 out of 10 for him.
Yeah. Is it a 10 out of 10 for you?
The demo was fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. The demo was like an 8 out of 10.
Wow. That's high praise coming from you.
Yeah. It's a good demo.
Oh. All right. I'll tell Yoshi the next time I run into him.
More demos like that. I can't wait for the demo to Final Fantasy XVII.
Yeah. Oh, but just imagine.
In 10 to 12 years.
10 to 12 years. Yeah, that sounds about right. Well, we'll see. It's real weird the way that they stagger those things. It's like, not the same team makes Call of Duty every year. It's like, generally there'll be like the A team on one Final Fantasy, and the next one will be the B team. And then they switch off. So maybe Final Fantasy 18, this team will be back on it.
So stick to the even numbers. Is that generally
that's
considered the policy?
I thought about is this just the Star Trek rule? Is it only the even numbered ones are good? Where I was like, oh, is it only even numbered Final Fantasies? But there are some good odd numbered ones. In general, though, I think I prefer the even numbered ones. So there may be something to that.
Interesting.
It is very interesting. And, something I could spend the entire rest of the episode talking about, but I have a feeling it would be a very one-sided conversation.
Yeah. Sorry, I can't hang with you on Final Fantasy.
Yeah, no, I mean, we'll get
analysis.
you caught up. We'll get, you can play through all of those pixel remasters for the backlog attack this year, and then we can just go at it.
Actually, I was going to ask for your sort of RPG advice on is I got a note this morning in my little Google News tracker thing that Dragon Quest 1, 2, and 3 for the Switch are all on sale right now.
Ooh.
And Dragon Quest 1 is like $3. Is it worth? Would you recommend rewinding all the way back to the beginning on those Dragon Quest games?
I mean, I would. Yeah, I definitely would.
Would you recommend I rewind all the way back to here in 2023? Are they approachable? Are they enjoyable? Is it something that I can wrap my brain around, or would it just be kind of a gaming oddity at this point?
I think it would be, especially Dragon Quest 1, would fall more on the side of a gaming oddity at this point. But I think it's worthwhile. I mean, here's my tip for you, is get it on your phone. Get, Dragon Quest 1, at least, get it on your phone. Because I know, that's the most recent place where I played it. I played the iOS version a couple of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And it was great. As a mobile experience, they've, sort of updated it, made changes to the interface and everything that work pretty well. It's definitely you're playing a game from 1985 or whenever that came out. So it's not going to be like Final Fantasy XVI in terms of production values or anything. You only have one party member. Although, hey, you only have one party member in Final Fantasy XVI, so maybe it was ahead of its time. But it's like, it's fairly bare bones sort of RPG experience. But totally playable, I think. It's just a weird little game you can knock out on your phone in like 5 or 6 hours. I don't know how long it is.
Oh, really? Is that brief?
Yeah, I mean, although I know what I'm doing in that game because I've played it a bunch of times, so I just know where the next place to go is. So it might take you a little while if you're not using a guide. But here's the thing. Just use a guide. just look up the answers. Let me tell you, the first time I played Dragon Quest, it came with the whole story behind Dragon Quest 1 in the US where Nintendo Power would send out copies to subscribers, and that was how they got a bunch of people to check this out in the first place.
No, I didn't. I mean, I thought you were going to sort of tell the story of how it was called Dragon Warrior once upon a time, but that...
Excuse me, Dragon Warrior in the US. I
don't know the Nintendo Power story.
Oh, it was just a bonus item. If you subscribe to their magazine, you would get a copy of Dragon Quest during whenever this giveaway existed.
Wow, like with sending you the cartridge to play the game.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a good bonus.
It is, yeah, pretty good. How many magazines give away a whole video game these days?
Yeah. I mean, I used to like those demo discs. We've established that I like a good demo. But yeah.
Not even the demo in this case, just the full game.
Wow.
But that's sort of incidental to the whole thing. My point is, when you got Dragon Warrior, as it was called, for the NES, it came with a manual and everything, and then it had a little, I think, map and a little sort of cheat sheet about where you're supposed to be in the game, at what level, at various points. But then it came with this whole book, if I remember. It was little mini magazine or pamphlet thing, which was sort of a mini strategy guide / lore book.
Oh.
And if I remember correctly, maybe I got this information from elsewhere, it would just tell you, there's a ring hidden here, so, check the ground at this point, or here's where the secret armor is, or here's exactly where to go next in the story. And at that point, in my sort of gaming career, and also just in my life, I was not super concerned about spoilers or anything like that, so I had no problem just going through this book and looking up all this stuff.
Probably more concerned about missing the ring in the grass than about spoilers. So that's good advice.
Yeah. So my first experience with Dragon Quest was sort of just the full spoilers, just following this walkthrough from minute 1. To tell you the right equipment to buy. I'm okay, strategy guide thing, I'll take your word for it. But it was this fully guided experience. And I think that, it certainly helped shave off all the countless hours I would have spent having to go back between towns and figure out okay, who's going to tell me where to go next?
Right.
So that's my advice if you want to play Dragon Quest 1 in 2023. Get it on your phone just so you have easy access to it and you can pick it up, play it for a little bit, and then put it down. And just I wonder if they have this version of the guide digitized or as a PDF somewhere, because that would be awesome. But just
out there somewhere.
Just use a guide. It's fine.
All right, good to know. It is $2.99 on the Google Play Store, so it's cheaper than actually playing it on the Switch at this point, which I think is $3.25 on the Switch. So
save a whole buy a gumball or something. I don't know.
So I don't have the best track record with old games, but I have a lot of curiosity and interest in the Dragon Quest games. There was no part of me that thought I'd be able to sort of successfully jump into a Dragon Quest 1, 2, or 3 experience and just sort of figure it out. So I figured I'd get your take on it here.
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't think you're going to come away from this and be oh, Dragon Quest 1, my new favorite Dragon Quest game. But I think you'll get to encounter your first blue slime and hear some of the classic soundtrack and all that stuff.
Yeah.
It'll be, it's sort of an interesting just look back on the series.
Cool. All right. Well, good tip. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. I would say, if you feel continuing down that route, I don't know. If you absolutely love Dragon Quest 1, then maybe you can think about Dragon Quest 2. Dragon Quest 3 is probably where it starts to get more interesting, because then that's when they introduce, the job system, sort of similar to the one in Dragon Quest 9.
Mm-hmm.
And that one is much more substantial, sort of story-wise.
Cool.
It actually has some really good plot twists in it, which I'm not going to give away because they're so good. But that's like, among Dragon Quest fans, mostly thinking about sort of the Japanese audience because there are far more Japanese fans. That is like, a landmark game in a lot of people's like gaming careers. Dragon Quest 3.
3 is where it kind of hit its stride.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I think Nintendo was really good for a while of re-releasing the back games because 9 was a big deal. Mm-hmm. 9 was the first one that I kind of got in on. And then slowly over time, 8, 7, and 6, I think, kindly came out. And then it got a little weird from there. I remember some other ones came out, but I didn't love 8, 7, and 6 mostly because of the random spawns and stuff like that. There's a lot of like the convenience things in 9 didn't exist in the previous game, so it was a little more difficult to go back from there. So I've certainly gotten nowhere close to 3, 2, or 1 at this point in my Dragon Quest career. So I'm curious, but I know, I don't have a great level of patience for playing old video games.
I would be very curious to hear what you think about Dragon Quest 1. Oh, here's the thing. I totally forgot that they're making the Dragon Quest 3 remake, the HD 2D thing. Which, haven't heard about that in a while. I wonder if that's still happening. I mean, it must be. It's just taking their time with it.
I'll wait on that then.
So, play that when it comes out. Like, play the mobile version if you're just desperate for it. But, I assume they'll do an amazing job with the remake. That should be worth checking out.
Dragon Quest 3 on Android is $10. I'll wait.
Mm-hmm. That one, it's at the point where I think, oh, maybe you do want that one on the Switch. Because it feels more substantial.
Yeah.
But with, knowing that the remake's coming, just wait for that. It'll be fine.
I mean, they're all on here, up to 8.
Oh, on the mobile?
Yeah.
Yeah, they were doing a good job.
Dragon Quest Builders is on here.
What? Did you play that? I can't remember.
I played the first one on the Vita.
Oh, on the Vita. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Here's what you should do. You should play through all of Dragon Quest 1 on your phone. Use the guide. And then you can go get back into Dragon Quest Builders. You'll have a whole new appreciation for it because it is just so much of Dragon Quest 1 shows up in that game again. It's amazing.
Okay.
I hope you're writing all this down. I'm going to hold you to all this.
I feel like, man, we should have been recording this. Oh, wait.
All right. Well, we got it on tape. So everybody out there, he's going to play through all these Dragon Quest games. It's going to be great.
We do have a summer backlog attack coming up. I don't know if I want to sort of start buying new games to just throw on the fire of the backlog attack. I certainly have enough old games kind of already in my collection that I should revisit during that. So
yeah.
Well,
throw Dragon Quest 1 on there. See how quickly you can get through that. I bet you could do that in a week.
All right.
The mobile version,
put it into consideration.
I don't know how the Switch version compares. I don't know which port of Dragon Quest it's based on, but when I went through the mobile version, it felt like it was rebalanced quite a bit, so it's not quite as grindy as it used to be.
Cool.
So yeah, just no excuse to take another run through Dragon Quest 1.
It'll be a year since my failure at playing Legend of Zelda 1. So why not fail at some good big 80s, RPG?
Yeah,
every summer. Yeah.
Why not? It builds character.
Sure.
Oh man, let me tell you, I'm still making my way through Final Fantasy 1, the Pixel remaster that I talked about a month ago at this point, probably. And I thought, I'm just gonna go into it blind, or as blind as possible, because I don't have a lot of experience with this thing. But I'm definitely getting to the point where I'm just I want to know where to go next. I'm just tired of sailing this boat around.
Cool. So, I forget if you were going to reapproach all of the Pixel remasters kind of in order, but I think you were kind of cherry picking them, right?
No, I do want to go through them all in order.
Yeah.
I don't know, I got to finish Final Fantasy 1, and then I'll decide if I want to immediately go into Final Fantasy 2. I think I will probably take a break in between. But
well, I mean, what a cool 2023 goal is to play the very first Final Fantasy and the most recent Final Fantasy in the same year.
Yeah, the Final Fantasy sandwich. And then, I don't know what goes in the middle. We'll figure that out.
I'm sure that's like a special at a Denny's somewhere in Japan. So.
Oh, Final Fantasy sandwich, please.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Oh, man, good.
What comes on a Final Fantasy sandwich?
Well, it depends who you ask. Everybody has their own take on what makes a good Final Fantasy sandwich. I definitely don't want to get into that discussion. That's like a 10-hour show.
You're right. We can pivot to things we've been playing recently. You've been playing Final Fantasy XVI, obviously. I've been playing this fun little game called Viewfinder.
Mm-hmm.
Which one should we start with? I think we've done enough Final Fantasy. We've warmed people up with Final Fantasy.
Oh, here we go. Final Fantasy sandwich.
Let's pivot to Viewfinder, and then, we can put the top bun on at the at the end of the show here.
Wait, we started out with Dragon Quest. This is going to be a very confused sandwich.
Yeah.
Can you combine them like that? That's like...
They're all the same.
It's like matter and antimatter.
Star Trek, Star Wars, Dragon Quest, Final Fantasy, all the same.
Yeah. My favorite things.
Little Lord of the Rings in there somewhere.
But Viewfinder. All right, let's get
Viewfinder. Yeah, Viewfinder.
Not to be confused with Viewmaster, which is what I played this weekend.
Which is what I thought this game was called until I actually started playing it this weekend. So no, Viewmaster is a copywritten toy from like the 60s. Viewfinder is just a part of a camera that you look through.
Yeah.
So Viewfinder is a new first-person puzzle game. If you think of something like a Portal or Entropy Center from last year, The Witness, there's some really good ones out there that you could play. That has a cool hook similar to those games. The hook in Viewmaster. Nope. See, the hook in Viewfinder is
the hook in Dragon Quest.
In Viewfinder is that you early on you find photographs around the level, and it'll be like a picture of a door or a picture of a bridge, and then you can take that 2D photograph somewhere else in the environment, hold it up, and kind of lock it into place with the right trigger, and it transforms that 2D photo into a 3D thing that lives in the level. That you can then enter into the photo. So if it's a picture of a bridge and you need a bridge to get to someplace far away, you can take this photograph, kind of hold it up, lock it in, and then it creates a bridge for you to walk across to get there. That doesn't sound like much of a puzzle. Obviously, it's just sort of like, I need a bridge and here's a bridge. But the first time it turns a 2D thing into a 3D thing, like it breaks my brain a little bit. It's like I had to restart at the last save, call my girlfriend and go, look at this. It's really cool. So I did it again and she went, wow, that's really neat. It is this really surprising thing that somehow works beautifully, looks awesome. And you can kind of do it anywhere. Obviously you need a bridge there, so it helps. But it's not sort of a puzzle game that's built in a way that sort of feels like it has kind of one solution and you have to sort of stumble upon it or figure it out. You could take that picture of the bridge and really just put it any place in the environment. If it clips through other things, walls of a house, trees, etc., they just clip through it. So you end up with half of a tree or a wall shaved off of your house. The only thing you can't break in Viewfinder is the little portal device that transfers you to the next level. If you break that, it's level over. You have to rewind and start again. But everything else is fair game. So it's really cool initially that you're sort of scouring around the environments looking for photographs. So stuck to a pegboard, on a birthday card. Where else do you find photographs? Brochures, postcards, etc. And there's always some sort of little detail, some fun little thing inside the image that helps you progress through the level, helps you solve a puzzle. As you get a little further into the game, you start getting your own kind of picture making tools. You get cameras. It starts with little stationary, mounted, instant cameras. You eventually get a camera that you can kind of carry around with you. You get photocopiers that allow you to put a picture in and make copies of it. So if you have a solution that requires 3 batteries to power up the duplication device, but you don't only find one, take a picture of it, put it on the copier, make some copies, and then turn those 2D photos of batteries into 3D batteries that you can pick up and put inside the device to power up the transfer.
Can you just make unlimited photocopies of stuff?
You yeah, for photocopies, I think you can, honestly. I don't think I've run into a limit on that. Your handheld camera is limited by the amount of film that you can find.
Okay.
So you do have a tool that sort of limits you from breaking it so horribly that you just fill the world full of batteries. But yeah, I think the game is really smart about continuing to find cool little little level ups, little sort of an additional thing you can kind of do with this 2D to 3D power. That feels really neat. And again, feels like a little bit like magic kind of every time it happens, for the first time in some unique way. Yeah, there was, yeah, I don't, not to get into, excuse me, not to get into big spoilers or anything like that, not to get into any spoilers, but there's definitely, solutions that seem super obvious, and there's solutions later on where it's sort of like, holy cow, that's like next level gaming. That's like the levels in Portal where you're like, everything has to go exactly right in exactly some sort of like magical way for you to be able to like launch yourself through the air and bounce off of a wall and shoot the portal at exactly the right time. And then boom, you land on the platform at the end and the door opens. It feels a little bit like magic. That's the only word I can kind of keep coming back to. There are definitely...
Sound real taken with this.
Yeah, there are definitely parts of Viewfinder that feel that way too. And I love that Portal feeling. I think a lot of games sort of aspire to it. I think most recently Entropy Center really sort of aspired to sort of doing the Portal thing. But Entropy Center had a lot of little rules around it. Like you could only sort of like, the hook of that game is you had a gun that could sort of rewind things that were in decay, entropy. And or things that had fallen apart or crumbled or broken. So it only sort of worked on very specific things at a very specific time. The game also had like platforms that would shoot you in the air and stuff like that, but they only worked if you put them down at exactly the right spot in the level. So it really wasn't necessarily even about sort of solving puzzles sometimes, as it was sort of figuring out like, where's the thing I have to rewind? Where's the place I have to put the jump pad? Like you're putting puzzle pieces into a grid. Portal, the Entropy Center, Portal and Viewfinder feel very kind of open in a way that I think could feel a little overwhelming to some folks, but I think just feels like enough of a playground to me that like there's something fun about kind of breaking it. There's something fun in Portal about like bashing your skull against a wall or dumping yourself off the side of a building into a vat of acid and having to start the level over, that you sort of learn by destroying sometimes yourself in that game. And Viewfinder feels very similar. It feels like there's a lot of experimentation you can do about like that 2D to 3D transition, and breaking parts of the level. Tearing through walls, putting bridges in places where they're not supposed to be, taking a picture of a skyscraper and then rotating the photograph so it makes a ramp, and then walking up the side of the skyscraper to get onto the roof of another building. You don't necessarily know if you're solving the puzzle the way that developers intended, or if you found some cool secret way that nobody ever thought of before to get there. And I like that. I think that is what the Portal thing is. That improvisational, like, I don't know if this is the solution, but this is my solution for being able to get through it. I think a lot of the two new Zelda games feel like that.
I was going to say, this sounds a lot like the approach to puzzles in Tears of the Kingdom.
Right.
Where it's like, I bet this is not what they had in mind. And also just the fact that I would love to carry around like a bunch of photocopies of like very long bridges, for instance.
Yeah, there is a way to do that in Tears of the Kingdom eventually. Yeah. But yeah, it's cool in Tears of the Kingdom because you have 100 tools that you can kind of make interact in unique ways to sort of get those weird improvisational solutions. Viewfinder, you kind of have one or two, but the levels are finite. They're fairly small. You're kind of walking through like apartment buildings and laboratories and what else are you kind of walking through? There's like a train station and stuff like that. There's a plot here. You're kind of, you're exploring, looking for kind of a secret. There's a bunch of audio logs, of course, that you can play from researchers who are doing some kind of research. Maybe it's related to the photograph thing that you're doing. Maybe it's related to some other sort of mysterious details. I'm not super hooked on the on the mystery. It feels like a little bit of window dressing to like just sort of like create this vehicle for messing around with the photographs. And that's fine. I don't need Portal didn't really have much of a story. It had a villain, which is enough in that game. Viewfinder doesn't really have a villain. But yeah, it's enough to sort of keep you moving from thing to thing. But yeah, the tools and the toys are really the big hook in Viewfinder, and it feels a little like sorcery every time it kind of goes right.
That's cool. It's cool. I've seen some clips of this, and it does look very cool. Like they show the transition of like it looks like stuff just popping out of a Polaroid, like you've been saying.
Yeah.
I wonder, just in my case, if I would get to maybe like 5 or 6 rooms in and just be completely stumped by stuff, because that's the sort of thing that I would just like get to a point in Portal and just go, okay, there's like way too much stuff going on in this room for me to deal with, and my brain would just shut down for a minute.
Oh.
Not to say, I mean, I did eventually get through that entire game, but
yeah,
just watching the previews for this, I'm like, oh man, this looks like it could be a head scratcher.
Yes, there you go. Yeah, it's a balancing act, right? It's a fine line to make. If you make a puzzle game that is so obtuse and so unapproachable, I think The Witness failed at that. I think The Witness was so complex, and like it was this big open world where you had like half of a puzzle was at the entrance to the world, and the other half was at the end, and you had to kind of solve A to get X, and like if you didn't get A, you couldn't get X, and you were stuck. And yeah, it was just sort of like incidental puzzles everywhere. I sort of get the ambition of a game like The Witness, but the puzzles in it were so difficult and so hard to kind of suss out that the logic didn't work for me.
That's a good example, because that is sort of the sense of fear I get when I look at a puzzle game like this, because like I kind of want to play the whole thing, right? I want to get to the end. I mean, it's less important if it's not like Portal, and there's not really a plot or a plot that I'm interested in running through it. But as much as I sort of like the idea of The Witness, I remember sitting down and somebody showing it to me because they were like, "Oh, you got to check this out." And I was like, "Okay, I know a little bit about The Witness," and they just showed me one of the puzzles from later in the game, and I just thought, okay, there's no way I'm ever playing this game, because I would just never have figured this out, like not even remotely, and I would have just been stuck in the middle of this game somewhere, and it would just live in my head, like, hey, why don't you you didn't finish The Witness yet? Why don't you go and finish The Witness? And it would just be an impossible task.
Just a badge of your failure, right?
right. Just sitting forever unfinished in my backlog.
Sure. I don't think the Viewfinder is that. I think certainly there are parts of this game that feel difficult, but again, because the levels are fairly small and the tools that you have are pretty finite, you have this camera, right? and it does sort of deploy some other little tricks as you kind of go that you learn quickly but it does not feel so insurmountable or so illogical that you can't sort of eventually piece it together. I will admit that there was a point during the game where I completely froze. Like I hit a level where I think I did everything. I did all the stuff. I've rewinded and started over and tried things different ways, and I just could not suss out the solution. I'm playing it. I was playing it before it came out, and the PR contact said, "Let me know if you get stuck." And I had to write to them and say, I got stuck. So he sent me the solution. He sent me the screenshots of how to get through it, and I was able to do it. But I don't know that I would have gotten that solution on my own either. So maybe this is sort of like me talking out of both sides of my mouth. But
how long do you give yourself in those situations? Like, how long do you decide, okay, it's time to look up the walkthrough or whatever?
Yeah, I would say that I tried this one level in Viewfinder probably 25 times. 30 times, like approaching it different ways. And you could rewind too, so you don't have to restart the level every time. You can sort of like rewind to the last picture you took or the last room you entered. So there's like a little scrubbing like VCR controls at the bottom of the screen that allow you to like rewind for a second, or you can double tap the button and it just rewinds to the last sort of notable choice you made. So I probably spent an hour and a half.
Wow, just this
scrubbing
one room?
through this. Yeah, in this one room, trying to figure out what I thought should be a fairly obvious solution. I'll tell anybody who is here, not the solution, but it was level 3.6.
Okay.
So if our listeners decide to give Viewfinder a try this weekend, know that if you get through 3.6 without having to look it up on the internet, you are better than me.
All right.
Because I could not. But I, in general, up to that point, I thought the Viewfinder was pretty approachable. And there were not a lot of serious sequences where I found myself really just beating my head against a wall. So which is when this one level sort of came up like it just stopped me in my tracks, because I'm like, I feel like I'm deploying all the things the game has taught me up to this point, and none of them are working. So I went through the coping thing where I'm like, well, it's a bug. It's pre-release. It must be a bug.
I love that.
So I searched the internet to see if anybody else was struggling with it, searched on Twitter, I even went to the developers Discord to see if they had like a little private room pre-release players were talking about. No luck. I had no resources. I was stuck over the weekend until the developer's PR guy could write back to me on Monday morning with help. So yeah, I was doing really good up until I hit that wall in level 3.6.
You know what you gotta do is you gotta record a video of you clearing room 3.6 and put that on YouTube, and then you will have the like million view video.
I'll get the hits.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good choice. That's a good call.
I was just thinking, I'm sure there were points in Portal where I would just have to put it down, like come back the next day. I don't think I went to a walkthrough for that game. But I mean, like in ideal circumstances, I have enough time to spend with a game where I just like, okay, I'm not getting it. I've probably been looking at this thing for too long, so I'm not even able to think straight at this point anymore. So I'm just going to come back to it tomorrow.
Yeah.
And then sometimes the solution is just obvious as soon as I load it up the next time.
Yeah. Yeah, I was hoping that would be the case with Viewfinder, but it was not.
Yeah, I always just feel like if I go immediately to a guide, first of all, I feel like slightly cheated. But then I agree. It just takes me to another room that's more difficult. I'm like, oh, great. Well, what was I expecting?
It would get easier after the thing that completely froze you.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree. And looking it up, Googling it is not like my first choice. But I wanted to finish it before I talked about it on the show. So
right.
I was like, there's got to be a way to get through this, right? There's got to be some other human being on the internet stuck at the same place. But I could not find him or her, unfortunately.
I do find myself doing that more often, especially if it's something I'm planning to talk about on here. I'm just like, oh, normally, I'd come back to this and I spent another week playing it, but we got to get through that last level. So
in the interest of time,
off to YouTube.
Which was no help to me in this situation. But
right.
The game comes out this week, comes out on the day that this episode comes out on the PS5 and on Steam. Would recommend, despite the fact that I kind of got hung up on 3.6. I think the tools in it are really cool. It has kind of an interesting little story happening in the background. And no joke, every time you sort of do the trick, the central like thing in Viewfinder, it just feels awesome. You feel like a total badass just kind of manipulating the world in this game. It's really, really cool. Would definitely recommend it.
Cool. Well,
yeah.
Do they have this in VR? So, whenever it pops out of the photograph, it's just full 3D in real space in front of you and just like your brain explodes.
No, unfortunately, I don't believe it exists in VR. It's one of those things where I was sort of like, man, is there some other like cool, like techie way that this game could exist? Like I was thinking VR. I was thinking like on the 3DS.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but on the
like
3DS.
Would this be like the perfect vehicle for the 3D screen, or like a 3D television that was a thing for a while? How cool would it be to have a Viewfinder experience on a platform like one of those?
Yeah.
I don't have access to a VR system, unfortunately, and the 3DS would never run this, unfortunately. But, 3D TVs not really a thing anymore, are they?
No, I haven't heard of one of those in a while.
Yeah. So you're a little bit limited by sort of like your ability to sort of judge 2D to 3D on your flat TV. But again, it does not sort of limit the impact of the first time you pull off that trick. It's still very cool.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I should check it out. Maybe I'll wait till there are more guides online in case I get stumped. But no, I do really like.
Let me get through it. I'll be your guide, DJ.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm in the home stretch at this point. I've gotten past that one crazy level, and the rest of it has felt pretty approachable. I have not had to ask the PR guy for help anymore. So I'm in the home stretch. It feels like the whole thing is probably about 6 hours long. So again, super approachable. Doesn't really overstay its welcome. And yeah, it continues to sort of present a mild challenge, but not in such a way that it makes me want to throw the controller across the house.
Well, that's always good.
Definitely. I agree. Should we pivot back to Final Fantasy to top off our sandwich?
Back to Final Fantasy. Yeah. So I finished Final Fantasy XVI.
Oh, wow.
What a weird game that was.
You and Eshin.
Yeah. I wonder how we lined up. I always assume that he is just done with stuff in 24 hours after it comes out. But
he's very fast.
I've been taking my time on this a little bit. I was very bogged down at the start because I was trying to do a lot of side quests, and after a certain point, I realized the side quests are not that interesting, at least not in comparison to the main campaign. So I just decided, you know what, I'm just gonna stop doing all of these. If I'm really eager to do some side quests, I'll have them all later on to come back to. And I just wanted to do the campaign because, if you remember from a few weeks ago, I was really into it. I had a good time with the demo. The full game, I think, starts off. I mean, it picks up right where the demo ended, and then it really hits the ground running. Especially once you get into the big sort of set piece battles. But it's also just been a very weird experience, and we talked about this a little bit. In that, a lot of there are a lot of points in Final Fantasy XVI where it just feels like a movie. And I'm not talking about just the cutscenes. I'm during the actual battles, there's just long stretches where you do not have to do anything. You're just sort of watching them play out on screen. But I was weirdly okay with this, and it became kind of this driving factor to me where I was okay, I'm actually I'm into the storyline. The storyline itself is pretty good, but I kind of just want to get to the next one of these icon battles. That's the name of the big summoned monsters in the game is EIKON. So I just want to see one of these things fight the other big monster again, which is also weird.
Icon. When I played the demo, I thought that was Eokin or something like that. I thought Icon did not even occur to me.
Oh yeah. See, I cheated because that's what they call them in Final Fantasy XIV. So I was aha, I know what they're talking about.
I know this word.
Yeah. But anyway, it's funny because at some point, I just decided I was not interested in this sort of stuff, just CG monsters fighting on in a video game. I've never really been big into Godzilla movies, just kaiju battles. Yeah. And especially in some reason when it shows up in a video game, I just up until this point, I just thought, well, it's clearly just two video game monsters fighting. It feels like there's not really weight to it. It's very exciting, of course, but I just can't get invested in it. But there's just something about the battles in this between the icons where it is just pure spectacle. And somehow I'm totally on board with it. Some of them, I don't want to give away anything that happens because one of the I think one of the comments from the developers is they knew they were going to have a series of these battles between the giant monsters, and they wanted to make each one sort of feel very distinct from the next because they're essentially the pivotal boss battles in the story. Mm-hmm. And there are some of these battles where they would just be again, not totally interactive, but I just couldn't believe what was happening on the screen. Like I couldn't believe, just from a visuals point of view, I was like, this is like something I've never seen in a game before. The parts that are interactive, it's like, on some level, it's very silly because it is not what I typically think of something that would be in a Final Fantasy game. But you get to take part in some just unbelievable set pieces in this game. And I found myself just like, one would finish up and it would just be like an adrenaline rush from start to finish, like 30 minutes long. Some of these battles lasted. And I would just be like, oh my God, I think I need a break after that one. I need to like lie down. And then when I come back to it, I just go, okay, how long until I get to the next one? I don't want to do any of these quests where it's just talking heads back and forth anymore. I just want to see one of these monsters fight the next monster. So that was very cool, and at the same time, very weird.
It's I'm surprised that they sort of stuck the landing on that, because the one in the demo I thought was not super compelling. I was not even sure at times if I was actually doing anything.
I think you are not doing things the entire time during the demo battle. Okay.
Because it's two giant monsters fighting each other. Like DJ said, it's like a kaiju battle. You're sort of moving a reticle around, but I wasn't sure if anything was actually happening. And then there were like, little power bars at the top of the screen. And I was like, well, that one keeps going down. I suppose that's probably good. But it did not feel terribly interactive. So the fact that eventually in the course of the game, these become compelling and you were actually looking forward to them happening is surprising to me, because that wasn't necessarily, I thought that was the weakest part of the demo.
Oh yeah, I don't know if the demo one is like particularly good. It like visually it's very impressive, because it's just like everything's on fire and they're just throwing fireballs back and forth, and the soundtrack is blasting, but not incredibly engaging gameplay wise. Although that was sort of true about the rest of the game. Like even when you get into the full game past the demo, the gameplay, like there's a little more complexity to it than there was in the demo, but it's still very much like do your one button combo, toss in a few of these like icon moves every once in a while, but generally just steamroll over enemies until you get to the next area. And I mentioned last time I was playing it on story difficulty, because I just felt like I appreciated the flow better. Like I didn't really need the bosses to put up a huge fight, because I'm kind of just there to like watch Clive triumph over all these bosses and do sort of the video game hero thing. But I know you can pump the difficulty up, and actually after you finish the game, there's an even harder difficulty level that you unlock, and it gives you sort of a bullet point list of like, hey, if you crank it up to this level, which incidentally is called the Final Fantasy level of difficulty. So there's story, action, and Final Fantasy. They're like, hey, you can, level up your character beyond the level cap. You can unlock new equipment, and there's like special exclusive content to this mode, which I assume they're just talking about more difficult bosses to fight. And I thought, well, I don't know if I want that, because, I play... I was going to say I played Devil May Cry. I've never played Devil May Cry. I play Bayonetta on the easiest setting. I don't really have any interest in becoming like a Bayonetta or Devil May Cry master. So, as much as I enjoyed getting through the campaign and like doing the sort of story mode difficulty fights in this, I don't know how much I'll be experimenting with the Final Fantasy difficulty mode.
Yeah, I think, obviously I have a slightly different approach to difficult games than what seems like a lot of gamers, but I think games like Bayonetta and Devil May Cry are better on easy mode than, because you could be a little sloppy about it. You don't have to be super precise, and you still get sort of the joy of victory sometimes. Yeah, I appreciate gamers that like things to be super technical and to like eke out victories by a hair, but I am not that kind of gamer. So, I liked that Final Fantasy XVI, at least in the demo too, had a kind of had an easy mode to approach it, a story mode, excuse me. But it's funny that they call them the more difficult mode Final Fantasy.
It's a little silly.
It's a little backhanded.
I've been thinking a lot about, because we talked a lot about the difficulty level the last time, and I remember being very confused about who this game was for. Like, is it for Final Fantasy gamers? I don't think so, because it's like an action game. And is it for action gamers? I also don't think that's the case, because it's not like technical enough, unless maybe if you play it on Final Fantasy difficulty, it sort of scratches that itch.
It delivers that, yeah.
Yeah. Someone will have to get back to me on that. But the more I thought about it, eventually I just realized it's basically the level of difficulty that they use to design the dungeons in Final Fantasy XIV, which makes a lot of sense because it's like the same producer. I assume that he had sort of input around it because he's like producer on both games. But if I can just tell you about how the dungeons work. When I first started off playing 14, the dungeons, like eventually, you level up your guy, and at some point in the story, you have to group up into a party, and then all of you go into this dungeon, and you fight monsters on your way to the boss, and you try and like take out the boss, and along the way there are like a series of mini bosses. And when I first started out, I was like, oh, okay, here is like the core content of the game. Most of the time, like here's where the real action is, just doing these dungeons. And that's still sort of like more or less the case. So like there are like the high difficulty raids and everything, but it still feels like the dungeons are like what you spend the bulk of your time doing if you're doing like the battle content. And they're a lot of fun because you get to like run around with your party. You get to fight some cool bosses. A lot of the time the bosses have really interesting mechanics you have to sort of like react to and dodge and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So like cut to like 9 or 10 years later, still playing 14. They've been releasing 10 years of these dungeons. And at this point, they tend to get some criticism from sort of the more like enthusiast end of the community who have like been playing this game for a very long time. They're very good at it. They've been playing these dungeons for like 10 years at this point. And the criticism sort of revolves around, they're very like samey, and they're not especially difficult. Like the hardcore players are a little tired of them, and they start to look for other more difficult content to do, like the raids.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, like what I realize is that for players who are not in that hardcore group, they're just sort of like here for the Final Fantasy MMO experience. The dungeons are just like a ride they go on. So like every time a patch comes out, they add more of these dungeons. There's a new ride for you, and it's like, what's the ride this time? Oh, it's like on a train, or it's in a haunted house or something. Well, it just sounds like I'm naming Disneyland attractions, but it's like,
I'm sold.
Every time a patch comes out, there's like a cool new dungeon for you to go through, and yeah, it's a very linear path through basically always 3 bosses, so they're very predictable, and they're not tuned in a way where like you're going to be struggling against these things. Generally, you get through them on the first try every single time, and the whole party survives. But it's just like an exciting thing to do, and they're they're a lot of fun, and they're like visually really exciting.
Yeah, and there is a thing in Final Fantasy XIV that if you want that advanced challenge, that exists, right? There.
Yes.
I mean, yeah, you've been grinding away at one of those for a while.
Yeah, and like I don't know the exact numbers, but the majority of the community, the player base, does not do the savage level content. They especially don't do like the ultimate level content. But a lot of them just like everybody does these dungeons. Like, how could you not do the dungeons? And as soon as I realized that, it's like, oh, it's just the dungeons. They just made an entire Final Fantasy game that is only the 14 dungeon experience. Like, take me through this linear track and, challenge me a little bit. But, just blow me away with these awesome boss fights every so often. I feel like that is exactly what they're going for with this. And so as soon as I realized that, I was like, oh, it all makes sense now. And then for the people who want the savage level stuff, there's the Final Fantasy mode. Although weirdly this time I feel like I'm not in the group where, like I kind of want to do the raids in 14. I don't know if I want to do the Final Fantasy mode stuff in this because I'm not a huge fan of the battle system. Like, it's fun. It was fine going through the campaign. But I'm not just like, Oh yeah, character action games. That's like my genre. That's what I want to play all the time.
I got this. Let me take care of that for you.
Yeah. So I'm really curious to hear what people think, the people who are into that sort of game, if like the action level difficulty or the Final Fantasy level difficulty is like satisfying to them in a way that, trying to S rank all the like Devil May Cry games and the hardest difficulty would be.
Mm-hmm.
But that is a whole other experience for people. And I think a lot of people will just be totally satisfied going through the campaign and, going on a ride, essentially.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, that is also kind of a dangerous proposition, right? I mean, you have this sort of core group of Final Fantasy folks who kind of think they know what to expect from a Final Fantasy game, presumably, right?
Mm-hmm,
and then you make a product that doesn't necessarily sort of like steer into that, and that it's this other thing. And you have to wonder, I have to wonder as sort of a casual observer of this, is Final Fantasy XVI bringing kind of new people to the party?
Yeah.
Or are you just completely alienating everybody who got you up to 15? Again, to your point again, like, who is this game for?
Yeah. That's a good point. And another thing I thought about, because I was like, I don't know. Like, 16 was great. Had a great time with it. Really interesting experiment, I would say, because it's so different from every other Final Fantasy game before it. I don't know if I want 17 to be like this.
Oh, interesting.
I don't know if I want another one. Like, if it's just going to be an interactive movie, like more or less an interactive movie every time, even if it does have these incredible set-piece battles, I kind of miss having the whole like party setup and the job system, and having them be a little more strategic and not just full real-time action.
Really, none of that in Final Fantasy XVI. Because those are things that I consider to be like, with no experience here, a hallmark of a Final Fantasy game.
Yeah. A lot of that's just not there, which, is fine, because every time is sort of a new take on the formula.
Right.
But, I don't know if this is going to be like the template for future Final Fantasy games. I kind of found myself missing. The job system was a big thing. And like having other party members, I guess that's two things. But along the course of the campaign, you run into all these other characters who are like sort of the archetypal jobs. Like you run into a bunch of dragoons, which is like a classic Final Fantasy job. And I just thought, oh man, what if I could just be a dragoon for a little while? But no, you're just stuck as Clive, swinging his big sword around for the entire game. Maybe they could expand it a little bit if they do stick with this. I don't know what the solution is. Maybe I was thinking, like, what if they just do sort of a Mass Effect thing where you like, oh, actually, now that I think about it, I don't remember if you played as the other characters in that either, if you were just giving them orders or what. But I would love to just have a job change available. But then I realized that's just that Stranger of Paradise game, so I should play that probably.
The thing you want already exists, DJ.
Yeah, well, I think so. I remember the action in that being much more technical than story mode, or even like the action mode from what I played in the demo. So maybe that is something that's interesting to me. You could definitely swap jobs around, so that sounds good. I don't know if I'll be quite as into the story with with Jack and whatever was going on with that game. But the combat-wise, I remember I liked the demo quite a bit. So we'll see.
There you go.
Oh, I would also love if the next one is not quite so bleak. I haven't seen Game of Thrones, but like, was that show especially bleak? I mean, it seems like it was a little bit, but at times this was just almost comically sort of grim.
Yes. Yeah, I think, and I've not seen all of Game of Thrones, but I've seen enough to have a sense of, at least what the first 2 or 3 seasons were, and it is pretty unrelentingly bleak.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. I remember talking about, the demo for 16 was pretty dark. And I remember saying like, oh yeah, once you start the full game, there's a bunch of like really beautiful vistas that you get to walk through and sort of explore. And I remember just the scenery being amazing. And I don't think this is a spoiler. Like, the world in 16 is not in a great place, and just like terrible things keep happening. And it feels like like I was revisiting one area in the full game after certain events have happened, and just trying to take some screenshots because I was like, I want to take in some of the landscapes a little bit, and it was very like sort of overcast and foggy, and I thought, well, maybe there's a weather system in game. Maybe I just came here on a bad day and it's like not great weather for taking photos. But the landscapes in the game just get progressively more sort of gray and overcast as the plot goes on. And I'm just like, wow, this is never going back to how it was in those few hours in the start of the game. It's just getting worse and worse. So that was kind of a downer.
It's funny that video games have sort of like looped back around themselves, and we're now going back to sort of like the grim, dark, early 21st century.
The whole Gears of War take on everything.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So I get that, that's sort of what they set out to do, because they were like, yeah, we just want to make Final Fantasy in the Game of Thrones world. So congratulations, you did it. Maybe next time we can have like, well, I was going to say like a plucky JRPG protagonist, but I don't know if I want to backpedal that hard.
I mean, that was the last one. The last one was sort of like boy band fantasy road trip, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's a little silly. So maybe somewhere in between those two. Like we said, like get the party from the Dungeons and Dragons movie into the next game. That would be fun.
I would play that.
Yeah. So, man, what a weird game. I think I really enjoyed it. I mean, it was just it's just so weird.
It sounds like you did, but I mean, obviously you have a sort of a right. I mean, we as consumers have rights to be sort of critical of the things that we buy, but you're clearly very invested in the world of Final Fantasy, so you come at this from a perspective of certain expectations, right? So the fact that I feel like you were kind of able to get past that and still have fun with this thing that didn't quite kind of live up to those expectations is cool. I mean, that's, it's a testament to the game. I think it's a testament to where you're at as a gamer. That's probably a good game. Probably something people would have fun with.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I'm curious. I've seen a lot of people saying that like this is the first Final Fantasy game they played.
Yeah,
and they really loved it. They're just like, can't believe some of the stuff that happens in the game. I think they're going to have a very difficult experience trying to explore the rest of the series if this is the entry point. But we'll see. I mean, there's a lot of variety there in the other games. Maybe they will find something that they're interested in.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I have somebody I follow on Twitter who started like I did with Yakuza Like a Dragon.
Oh yeah,
which is the only turn-based game thus far in the series, and she liked it so much she wanted to play some of the other ones.
Oh no!
And was like, "What the hell? What is even happening in this game?" And I'm like, "Oh no, that's the only one that's like that."
Yeah. Oh man, that's the opposite problem.
Yeah.
Oh well, you should tell her all about Final Fantasy XVI. Maybe. Oh no, that's the other. No, that's still the same problem.
Yeah, no, she wants turn-based. I think that's the.
Tell her about every other Final Fantasy game.
That might be the way to go. I suspect she probably has played those, if I had to imagine, but nor am I in a position to recommend Final Fantasy games to people. But
sure.
Yeah, I knew enough about sort of like the lifetime and ambitions of Yakuza games to know, like, oh no, that's the only one. Don't bother going back to the other ones, unless you're into that thing. People really like those games. Yeah. I know you and our previous co-host Paul really like those games, so they're definitely out there for people. But no, if you are expecting them to be Yakuza Like a Dragon, you're going to be disappointed. If you're expecting all the other Final Fantasy games to be like 16, you're probably setting yourself up for disappointment.
Yeah. Man, what if we just come back to this 40 years later and we're up to Final Fantasy like 36 and they have all been action games since this point? That would be weird.
Or what if they haven't and it's Final Fantasy 16 is this like weird oddity? What a strange, glorious moment it was in 2023 where we had this grim, dark Final Fantasy game where you were just beating people up and turning into a monster.
Oh yeah, no, I would love that. I'm so curious what the next one is going to be like. I just want to know, like right now, what is it going to be? What's going to happen? But that has been that's sort of like a special attribute of the series. Just like every time there's like some weird new idea that they put into the next sequel. So what's it going to be the next time? I'm actually worried because I think it's going to go back to, well, I don't know if it'll be the same team that made like 15, because I think they're all working on the 7 remake, like the next part of that. So who knows? Maybe 17 is wide open for somebody else to come in and take it over.
Yeah.
Maybe it'll be one of the Call of Duty teams. I hear they're not making those things anymore.
I say maybe there's room in the universe for all of these things to sort of peacefully coexist. Maybe, like the Yakuza games, they're going to make turn-based Like a Dragon games, and they still seem to be making brawlers, and they're just doing all kinds of stuff. Yeah. Like Persona. Persona has there's a turn-based strategy game coming out.
Yeah.
And hopefully someday Persona 6.
Someday, once they finish milking Persona 5.
Yeah. So, yeah, maybe all of these things can be in the world at the same time.
Yeah. I assume there will be like DLC or add-on content for 16 at some point, because they did a bunch of that with 15. It seems like, games are so expensive at this point that it would be a shame to just create all this stuff, all this stuff for Final Fantasy XVI and then not do DLC episodes with it. Plus, it just feels like they put a surprising amount of detail into the world and like the history of it to not do anything with it. Like, I feel like they could almost make an entire second game just exploring different corners of the world in 16. So there's got to be something else they have in mind.
Well, I mean, that's true of Tears of the Kingdom too. I mean, they've not announced DLC for that game, and it doesn't feel like a game that necessarily needs DLC, but they did it for Breath of the Wild. So, how do you continue to grow this epic thing?
Maybe they should add a motorcycle.
That was the solution in Breath of the Wild. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I get Breath of the Wild is probably another good example too. We'd have to sort of keep dragging it back to Legend of Zelda, but like, do we now expect that all future Zelda games will be like this?
I think they said that, this is the new template, right?
This is the template, yeah. But there's something sort of quaint about I don't know, like a smaller Zelda experience. I don't necessarily need them to be 250 hours every time.
I'll admit, I was actually really disappointed when I heard them say that. Like, as much as I love Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, but I don't know, just if they just keep making them in this format, that it feels like the sort of like novelty of it is already gone. Like, I almost wasn't expecting to enjoy Tears of the Kingdom as much as I was, or as much as I have been coming off a 1 month break when I detoured to play Final Fantasy. But no, I forgot what I was going to say. Like, they should mix it up a little bit.
Yeah. I don't disagree, because the one that I previously played was the Link's Awakening kind of remake, where everything looked kind of plasticky like toys, and that's great. That's an awesome game. It's not 250 hours. It's a very cool look with kind of a different kind of interpretation of Link and Zelda. I think there's definitely something that can be something to be said for, different interpretations, different perspectives on the Zelda brand.
Yeah.
If you think about, the games like Cadence of Hyrule or the Four Swords and things like that, there's all different ways that you can kind of repackage this to sort of still be true to Legend of Zelda. It doesn't always have to be this massive epic scale thing.
Yeah, yeah. My stance on sequels is like, okay, you can make one sequel, toss in all the ideas you didn't get around to in the first one, and like expand on it a little bit, but then go do something else. Don't just keep making the same thing over and over again.
Yeah. I'll take a trilogy. I'll even do a trilogy.
But maybe a trilogy. The third part better be pretty good, though. You better have a good reason for cranking out that third installment. When was the last time the third part of anything was amazing?
Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
Okay, well, yeah, okay. That's unfair, because that's Indiana Jones.
Die Hard 3. No, I'm kidding.
Okay, see, it's already starting to get questionable.
It falls apart, yeah. I'm going to need a week to think about this. I'll get back to you. Mission Impossible 3.
Really, though? Really? Okay.
Hey, I mean, it's fine.
Were you really like, thank God somebody made Mission Impossible 3?
Thank God J.J. Abrams made Mission Impossible. Yeah. Yeah. To be continued. Put a pin in this. We'll come back to it next week. I'll have thoughts.
Yeah.
On thirds. Thirds in a series.
Thirds, yeah.
Yeah.
But that's what, one of the nice things about Final Fantasy is that they're all sort of like a fresh take, or not entirely fresh, but like, throw out the whole cast of characters, redesign the battle system, all that stuff.
Yeah. Are there no direct sequels anywhere in Final Fantasy?
Oh, there are a bunch at this point. And a lot of them have not been great. But,
further serving your theory.
Final Fantasy X-2, like, if you can get over the fact that it's called Final Fantasy X-2, was actually really, really good. But then they did not make a third one. So, But that's great. I mean, that's my policy. Like, make a second one if you want. And it was good. But then they knew when to cut themselves off.
You need a good editor. Somebody who says, nah, it's enough.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, man.
All right.
Well, that's all I got on 16 for now.
Cool.
I gotta take a break. I feel like, I don't know if it's like the PS5 controller or what, but this is like one of the few games that I played that like my hand is kind of sore afterward.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I think like you use the trigger a lot, and it's got those like stupid PS5 triggers that are just like, they make it more difficult to pull sometimes.
Yeah.
That's just weird decision.
There's a lot of resistance in those PS5 triggers.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of the controller, but I think we've been over this. So I can go back to Zelda for a little while, see what what's been going on in Hyrule since I've been away.
Cool. Well, we'll come back to that next week. In the meantime, if you need any more video game hangover in your brain, you should follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/VGHangover. And you can always get show notes and links and tell us what you thought about this episode at VGHangover.com. We would love for you to join us on Discord, chat about video games and other fun stuff. You can get a link to that at VGHangover.com. And we would encourage you to subscribe, rate, and review us on your podcasting app of choice. Maybe tell your friends about the show too. That's always a big help. Yeah, really help us get the word out. Bring in new listeners. We appreciate it a lot. We also want to give thanks once again to Fear of Dark for our intro and outro music this week. If you'd like to hear more of his work, you can go to fearofdark.bandcamp.com, load all those albums into your cart, and send him a few dollars. That would be terrific. Yeah. We'll be back next week. Until then, this is Randy Dickinson. This is DJ Ross. Thanks for listening to Video Game Hangover. Goodbye. Good night. See ya.